Okay, well, I just want to welcome you to my talk on, I called it Getting Physical with the Beacon-Enabled Web. And my name is Jen Looper. I'm a developer advocate at Telerik. And I have a lot of interest in hardware hacking. I think the talk prior was, this seems to be the hardware room, and there's also a hardware, like a salon or a lounge outside that I think we should all go visit after this and see what we can play with. So it's all good fun. And so let's go ahead and get started. So this is kind of the mandatory who am I slide. I actually have a really weird background, and that is I actually have a PhD in medieval French literature. So you can ask me anything about 13th century prose romance, and I'll try to remember some of it. But because that's about as useful as that dude sitting on that nest of eggs, I decided to retrain when kind of at the tail end of the dot-com boom. And I've been a programmer for about 14 or more years. And I transitioned into a new role about a year and a half ago as developer advocate at Telerik, and I really love my job because it allows me to come to Fluent and speak to folks like you. So it's really, really fun. I have a couple websites. One is ladiesfirstmedia.com. That's kind of a showcase for the mobile apps. I'm really passionate about developing mobile apps. It's turned into a bit of an obsession, and I have like 17 in the App Store, so it's a really bad thing. But I also have a website called thinglearn.com, and this is a website for middle school kids, specifically girls, who might be interested in learning how to program by means of hacking on hardware. So I have a lot of projects hosted on Hackster.io, things like light up hair bows that you can kind of programmatically control and things like that might just attract a different demographic into this kind of interesting field. It's just a lot of fun, and I really enjoy doing it. So with this kind of humanities background and all this technical experience that I have, I'm always wondering actually how to merge these two worlds. So I set myself for this talk a challenge, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. Can we challenge ourselves to use these new technologies to engage modern audiences about old stuff? Like, there must be a way, right? This can't be so hard. What I wanted to do is to craft a magnetic cultural experience. So if you go into a museum, how can we use new technologies to enhance this kind of cultural experience? Part of that challenge is to also, of course, do no harm to this cultural site. We certainly don't want to break anything, we don't want to scratch anything, and we don't want people freaking out. We don't want things ticking and blowing up. So that's part of the tech challenge. I also wanted to create something with a very low entrance barrier, so something that a visitor to a museum or a cultural site, or a greenhouse in my case, would just be able to walk up and discover something new about an artifact or some kind of cultural experience. And I wanted to use bleeding edge tech, something like this, poor guy. So I wanted to enter the bleeding edge and use something that's really, really new to engage people about things that are really, really old. So let's talk a little bit about what museums are doing now. I'm sure you've been to these museums where you have to buy those awful handheld things that you hold to your ear, and you kind of like wander around, look like a perfect idiot, and get lost. And you get separated from your group, and then you start trying to talk into the phone. It's really bad. But really, the people are still doing this, and you have to rent them, and it's a pain in the rear. But that's what people are still using in museums to kind of learn more about the things that they're looking at. But a lot of museums are actually flirting with new technology. It's like ripping out my heart. To engage modern audiences who are expecting something different. One of these museums is the Musée de Cluny in Paris, and actually right now they're in the middle of doing an interesting QR code installation, and you can watch this group. It's a particular group that they've partnered with in Paris. They're slapping QR codes all over that museum. It's the Museum of Medieval History in Paris, one of my favorites. So you can, I suppose, download their app and go zapping QR codes and learn more. That's a kind of fun interactive experience. The MoMA has a very interesting dual app solution that they are offering their visitors. The Museum of Modern Art in New York City, they have two apps. One is for membership and learning, and I think there's an audio guide. That's the first one. And the second one is actually for making art. So you leave the MoMA and you're inspired to create something, with the second app. That's really, really cool, and it's really expensive. I'm sure they blew a wad on that. That's interesting. This talk was actually inspired by this really terrible app that I came across in the Musée Nissim de Camondo in Paris, which is it's a very sad museum, and we can talk about why it's very sad to me later. But it's a Jewish family that had a lot of rough times in in Paris, but they also had an incredible collection of furniture and fine art. But the app that they decided to build for this really important and culturally significant museum allows you only on Android to walk up to a particular china cabinet and you zap the picture of the bird on the china and you hear the bird song. This is where they went. I'm like, no, this is not for real, you guys, no, stop. And in fact, like, look at the reviews. This is just a bad scenario. So this is the museum where I just had this like revelation. There's got to be something better. We must do better than this, especially in such a significant museum. The Metropolitan Museum, however, in New York City is kind of brushing on the bleeding edge. They listen to their users and they realize that everybody who walks into the Met gets lost constantly. It's a huge museum, so you're wandering around. So they did sort of geolocations and they allow you to find where you're at. That's totally reasonable. It's a great use for a mobile app. Big museum, so big mapping app, and they use geolocation. But they also have a group who's doing some really interesting work with beacons, actually, one of my very favorite things. And they're using Eddystone beacons, and they created something called a beacon walk. And they stuck on these little beacons around in various parts of the museum and created a beaconized mobile app experience. So you download the app, you approach the beacon, and you're sent some information about the artifact that you're looking at. It's really cool. It's a beacon walk. But I don't think it ever went public. It was just something they tried to see if it would work. So what's wrong with these approaches? TechCrunch had this poem. I don't know if you saw it. I do not want your stupid app. I will not download this siloed crap. I do not like them so much. Nobody wants these like one-off mobile apps. The problem with all these approaches is that you do need to build an app. You need to maintain it. You need people to download it. You need to maintain it. Even you might need to maintain an earphone fleet. You need to do some kind of paper installation, like what they're doing with the QR codes. None of it's flexible. None of it's very scalable. And most of all, nobody really wants to download a mobile app when you're in a foreign country and you can't find Wi-Fi. There is no way I'm going to download. You know how that goes. There's actually mobile apps in Paris to find Wi-Fi. It's crazy. So let's talk about anything else that we can do. There must be a better way. So let's talk about what a museum wants. A museum wants to not maintain an app, I'm guessing. They want a scalable tech solution, something that they can scale and that will be flexible as their exhibitions change. They want this kind of flexibility. And a visitor wants no downloads. They really don't want to have to deal with downloading stuff. They want an active and immersive experience. And they might want something to take away. So I actually was inspired by our visit to the Phillips collection, a lovely museum. They have like one of everything. Like they got a little Monet and they got a little Impressionist, a little Expressionist. It's really nice. One of everything at the Phillips collection in Washington, D.C., but you walk through the photography collection and you are, after you look at all these photographs, you're told, okay, have a seat and draw yourself, and then put your picture on the clothesline. So these kind of like immersive little experiences, it's very low tech, but it just makes you think, how much more you remember after visiting such a site that has such an experience. So it's a good inspiration. So I was taking a look and trying to figure out what would be better, and I came up with the concept of treasure boxes. So this is something a little bit different, something that I created for Fluent, so you guys are like the inaugural unleashing of treasure boxes into the world. And I have it with me, and I actually got it through airport security, so I was pretty happy. So let's do something really different. Let's create treasure boxes, and let's create them with a beacon inside. Let's put the beacon inside the box. So this is an Eddystone beacon, and it's sending a signal to anyone who's within range to suggest that a content experience that might be of interest to them is nearby. So beacons, Eddystone beacons especially, they rely on Bluetooth. All beacons rely on Bluetooth. So you do need to have your phone with Bluetooth turned on. Beacons can be detected from about 70 meters away. They can tell whether you're near, intermediate, or in a far distance from them, so they can really say, come closer, come closer. It's kind of neat. They can push notifications at you. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they are currently in use, especially by retailers. There's a very freaky beacon experience in Urban Outfitters. You have one beacon that's welcoming you when you enter the store, and then when you're in the clothing, the line to try on the clothes, they're encouraging you to take selfies while in the dressing room. It's the freakiest thing I ever saw. I was just like, this is not a good use of beacons. But as my colleague said, the future is now, and it's on sale. Awesome, just what we need. So great, we've got a treasure box, we've got a beacon inside, it's beckoning you to come and take a look at something, but let's take it a little bit further, and we can actually install a photon inside. So I don't know if the previous speaker talked a little about photons. These are a device that is built by a company called Particle.io. I'm a big fan of theirs. They have a very interesting solution. And these are little microprocessors that have a Wi-Fi integration. So you can hook it straight up to your Wi-Fi if you can get connected. And it can do all kinds of interesting things. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the beacon beckon a person to an exhibit and send them to a web page that allows you to leverage the photon to unlock the treasure box. So it's one step further from a beacon integration. It's a beacon plus a hardware installation. So to build this, you need to install the box in a Wi-Fi connect. You need to install in the box this Wi-Fi connected microprocessor. And it's going to respond to the press of the button on a web page, which I'll show you in a second. So that web page is the URL that's emitted by the beacon. And then the beacon signal is picked up on your phone, and you're prompted to open a web page. So this is kind of the flow that we're looking for. But wait a second, I thought beacons only sent out UUIDs. Well, actually, there are two types of beacons now, and this is a really exciting new here's where we hit the bleeding edge, right? We're not just going to deal with Apple's iBeacon protocol, we're also going to deal with Google's Eddystone beacon protocol. So the closed Apple iBeacon protocol is sort of like, you can look at it as like an app beacon, because what it's doing is it's sending out a UUID, and you're expected to have built a mobile app to consume that UUID, pair it to content, and match it to something, to some call to action. But with Eddystone, actually, this new protocol by Google, these are browser beacons. So all they need is a physical web-enabled browser to consume the signal, and it'll prompt the user to open a web page. So all it's doing is sending out a URL. It's really, really exciting. At least this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. So the other thing that's nice about Eddystone is that it is open sourced, and iBeacon is proprietary if you care about those sort of things, but it's kind of cool. So these are leveraging the physical web. So let's talk a little bit about the physical web. This is new, this is hot, this is new tech, and the concept behind the physical web is that you can just walk up and use something. This is very, very cool. And Google, actually, this is very bizarre, but Google released a physical web-enabled browser for iOS about July of last year, and that's their Chrome browser for iOS, and it has physical web enabled by default. It's like, why did you guys start with iOS? What are you thinking? This is really crazy. But then what it did is it onboarded people like me who are now evangelizing. I think I see their strategy, all the weird iPhone people. So all you have to do really is to download Chrome for iOS, enable the physical web in Chrome for iOS, and you'll see the Today widget will be searching for physical web objects, and we can try this ourselves. And for Android, so this is the Chrome app that you're going to download, and this is what it looks like in the Today widget. It's a little bit hidden. I wish it wasn't so hidden, but it's one of the little widgets that you enable. And once it sniffs out a URL, it has the little physical web icon and just sends you to somewhere. And then soon we're going to have this for Chrome, like really, really soon. I'm in communication with the guy at Google who's developing physical web, and he's basically like very, very soon. Next iteration, Chrome 49 for Android, is going to have physical web enabled. And this is going to be very, very, very fun. So we're going to have some good times on Android. You can currently try the beta on Chrome for Android, and you can pick up a physical web signal as we speak. So how do we go about making a treasure box? Okay, ladies, get out your power tools. My favorite Makita. I literally love this thing. So what I did is I repurposed an old box that someone gave us. It's an old wooden box, and it had some latches on the outside. I got rid of all that stuff, and I installed internal latches. So this is going to be a box that's going to open and close from the inside. The phone is going to have the latch open and close. Don't forget to decorate it. This is probably the most important thing I'm going to say today. It has to be decorated. I strongly recommend sequins and crystals, but that's just me. So, and then you're going to take your Photon and configure it. So you're going to install your Photon into the box. This is about how big it is, not very big. And it's going to be leveraging the location's Wi-Fi. So it's going to pick up any API calls made by the mobile website that you're going to build, and that's going to be signaled out by the beacon. And what it's going to do is it's going to move a servo that you're going to solder to the Photon. So this is just a little arm that's going to open and close the latch. And here is the early prototype on a breadboard. This is really hard to film with one hand trying to push a button on a web page and control. So sorry about the choppiness. But anyway, I just have a basic website. I press the open and close button, and you can see how the servo arm is going to move. So it's a little like open and close. and then you're going to need to install that servo into the internal latch that you hot glued. Hot glue is your friend with all these projects. And it's just going to be opening and closing. So very, very simple. But it's really fun because it's Wi-Fi connected. So the final latch construction ended up looking like this. So you can see that the photon is listening and it's flashing a little bit. This is where everything's all soldered up together. So that's the opening and the closing of the latch. That's how it turned out. Next thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to configure a beacon. I'm a big fan of Eddystone beacons because it comes with a beacon cloud that you can use to leverage how your beacons are going to behave. And the great thing about Eddystone is that with the newest firmware that you're going to flash to your beacon fleet, you can pick whether it's going to be an iBeacon or an Eddystone style of beacon. So that's really cool. And you can see in the app, and it's a little hard to read, but I basically set this particular Blueberry beacon to be an Eddystone protocol, and I pasted in the URL that I want it to hit. So that's how you would manage your beacon fleet. And it works really well. It's just really nice. Install your beacon into the box. Again, hot glue, it's your friend. This is a dismantled Eddystone beacon. Normally they look like little rubber pebbles, but I had to change the battery, so I had to dismantle it. It's a long story. So that's how it ended up looking. And then you're going to need to build a website to connect to the Photon. So here's where product placement, Telerik products. Okay, so let's talk software. You're going to need to build a website to be emitted by your beacon. So why don't you make it interesting, and why don't you make it kind of like something having to do with the cultural thing that you're going to put your treasure box next to. So what I did is I created a website using what I call the monkey stack. So I call it the monkey stack because it uses Mongo, Node, Kendo UI on the front end, product placement, and Express. So you're going to be just building this basic website. What I did is I'll actually show it to you. May as well. And it's hosted on Heroku. And it looks like this. So it just has this open and close box button. It has a guest book that people can sign. I thought this would be a nice thing to have. It gives a list of more boxes that you can find, and it gives some troubleshooting advice. And on the About page, since I put this next to a sensitive plant in the Wellesley College greenhouses, you'll see the demo. I gave some information. So it's something that people could open up the web page, learn a little bit more, sign a guest book, and just integrate nicely and interface with the cultural object. All right. Great. Okay. You're going to need to flash some code to the Photon. Very, very simple. This is really, really simple. All you have to do is create this one little method called setPosition, and you're just going to feed it the position that you want it to set, and it's going to say servo, open, servo, close, set the position to this or that. Very, very simple. You just flash that right up to the Photon. Since it's Wi-Fi connected, you can do this from your home Wi-Fi, and it works really beautifully. And you can develop this code online, actually, using Particle.io's build IDE, or you can use it locally using the Arduino IDE. Works great. So flash that code to your Photon, and you're ready to start moving your servo arm. Final step, you need to get your website to connect to your Photon via the Particle.io API. That's going to be what's going to talk to your Photon. So here we just make a little AJAX call to my device, and I tell it set the position. Since I need to open it, I'm going to send the param 140. So just set the servo arm to be in position 140 to open. Very, very simple. Okay. There we go. Now comes the hard part, actually. That's all easy. That's like cake. You can do it at home. The really difficult part is actually getting permission from a venue to install these things. I begged and begged and begged. I begged for months. It's just like nothing. Finally, I got permission from the Wellesley College greenhouses. I guess they thought, if she bumps a plant, it's not too bad. But this is the hard part, actually. You need to be able to work with museums, work with these cultural sites to get permission. The other hard thing is you need to connect your Photon to the venue's Wi-Fi. I was in major panic mode when I came in because I tried to connect my Photon to the upstairs Wi-Fi. It did not connect. It was not happy because it has that gated page. But it works on the Fluent Conf, plain old password-based Wi-Fi, so that worked nicely. You need to worry a little bit about your power. Your treasure box needs to be powered up, so you need some kind of battery or maybe plug it in. You need, of course, to set up your box next to the target exhibit. And then this is also hard. You need to educate your visitors on how to experience it on their device. And here is the result. So you're hunting around, looking for a beacon signal, trying not to step on anything. There's no beacons in the banana tree. So this is where we have the box. Do you guys like sensitive plants? I love these things. And then you just open the box with your phone, and you discover a treasure. Try not to break anything. And here's the little treasures. So that's what it looks like. So a couple challenges around this whole installation and all this fun, beautiful things that makes me feel really zen, but there are some challenges. Of course, when you need to maintain a fleet of boxes, you're gonna have to worry a bit about breakage. I think that maybe a better solution than the wooden dowels that I drilled and installed by hand and all the soldering would be a 3D printed box. I think that'd be more robust. But you do have moving parts, so you're just gonna have to maintain it. Power issues is always a problem. You're gonna need to use some rechargeable batteries. Maybe a solar installation would be fun. Of course, you need to maintain the mementos, make sure the box is full. You need to maintain your beacons. Beacons supposedly last for 2 years. This is a lie. So just got to maintain those. The nice thing about Eddystone Cloud is it tells you when your batteries are getting low. Maintaining a web presence. This is one of the weird things about the whole physical web thing. You're just opening a URL, but there's no way for me to stop someone from 5 miles away from stumbling on the same URL and managing the box. So on Hackster.io, we're having this conversation of how we could maybe time out the URL or obfuscate the URL or somehow enforce proximity. That is a tricky bit. So that is a problem because the box will start like opening randomly and freak everybody out. You need to scale your site, of course, to support multiple boxes. That's a given. But there's some really interesting things happening in the future with this whole beacon photon hardware integration. One company called Blues.io has created a beacon that integrates very tightly with Photon. So, and it has a little battery pack that you can have right on top of it. So it makes a little sandwich of awesomeness. So I just got one. I just need to get the battery set for it, but I think that'll be a really good solution. I think, so the website that I created is basically just talking about a sensitive plant. But you need